All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Lunger. I'm a reporter for Missouri Business Alert, and welcome to our first Hangout on air. It's called Growing Missouri Startups. So for those of you who don't know about Missouri Business Alert, we are a startup online publication covering business news in Missouri from a statewide perspective. We're based here at the University of Missouri School of Journalism in Columbia. So today we've invited a panel of representatives from entrepreneurial support organizations to talk about startup incubators and accelerators, which have really blossomed in Missouri over the past few years. So if I could have each of our panelists just tell us who you are, the organization you're representing today, and what your position is. We can start with Blake.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Blake Miller. I'm with Think Big Partners here in Kansas City, Missouri. We're located in the Crossroads District in downtown Kansas City. I'm a general partner here, and I also manage our accelerator.
Perfect, thank you. And Brian?
I'm Brian Kinkade. I'm in Springfield, Missouri. I'm the director of the eFactory Business Incubator and Entrepreneurial Development Center. We are part of a Center City revitalization effort spearheaded by the City of Springfield, Missouri State University called Idea Commons, which blends multidisciplinary programs from the university and from private entities that blend innovation, design, entrepreneurship, and the arts.
Great, thank you. Kevin?
Kevin Fryer with SparkLab KC, obviously located in Kansas City. Business Accelerator, we've run through 2 classes so far with a total of 20 companies coming out the other side. So it's been a lot of fun over here.
Great, thank you. And Matt?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Matt Minetti. I'm with 630. We're a financial technology accelerator based in St. Louis, Missouri. We invest and provide resources and connections for early stage financial technologies. So we invest $100,000 into 8 early stage financial technology companies a year, and we're just getting going with our second class.
Great, thank you. And then over in the RJI, we have Luke Liddon, another reporter from Missouri Business Alert, and a couple of students. So Luke, do you want to introduce us?
Yeah, so we're here in the Palmer room right now, and people are still filling in, in the next few minutes or so, but everyone is having their pizza. They're excited about this Google Plus Hangout, and we are ready to go.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're so happy to have all of you with us. So we're going to take a few questions from the audience later in the Hangout, but first I just want to thank our event sponsor, Zapier. Zapier gives you internet superpowers to connect and automate the web apps you use, such as Basecamp, Wufoo, and MailChimp. You can see Zapier's directory of more than 300 connected apps at zapier.com. That's Z-A-P-I-E-R. And then just a reminder to everyone who is watching the Hangout, you can submit questions via the Hangout or tweet us your questions at hashtag GrowMoStartups. That's hashtag grow and then Mo as in M-O, startups. Great. So the reason we're here is because over the past couple of years, the country has really seen a surge in early-stage entrepreneurial activity, and we're going to hear today about how entrepreneurs are getting the funding and resources to succeed through accelerator and incubator programs. Before we jump into our first question, though, I'd like just one more time if all of the panelists could go through a 30-second elevator pitch for us. Tell us what your organization does one more time. What is your role in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in your city? So once again, we'll start with Blake.
Yeah, so it's always tough to have to come up with your own 30-second pitch. You're always helping everybody else to come up with one. But in short, think big. We help entrepreneurs build companies, and it's kind of one of those things where you look at the word accelerator or even incubator, and a lot of times they start to get overused. And frankly, we don't even really like those words, because what we do when we go to work with entrepreneurs is we really want to understand what their needs are, and we try to develop a program really around them based off of what their needs are. So our program is really a little bit more of a 6 to 9 month incubator, accelerator hybrid, really, if you will. And so we work with our entrepreneurs. We really try to understand what the problems are, provide services around what those problems might be. So if you look at what a traditional founding team is like, you have a hacker, a hustler, and a designer. And usually a lot of the companies that we work with have found product market fit and have gotten there with 1 or 2 legs of that tripod. We develop services around one of the other things that they're missing and to really help them grow with that. So we make investments strategically based off what their needs are, and then we also have a direct partnership with Microsoft Ventures here that really helps us grow that network with them.
Great, thank you. Okay, and Brian?
Yeah, the eFactory opened a year ago last March, so we're 13 months into this. It's a technology-focused small business incubator and entrepreneurial development center that's really focused on assisting businesses from idea to job creation or from startup to stability. The eFactory brings together many of the region's economic development and business development groups to help create a more unified ecosystem, playing off of what's already been in the communities, making it make sense together. We've tried to create a one-stop shop here for entrepreneurs to come and get answers, to seek resources. If the individual organization is not in our building, we have a connection to them. So our goal is both direct business services to our clients, but it's also facilitation of business resource partners, both in the building, in Springfield, and regionally.
Great, thank you. And Kevin?
SparkLab KC is really an outgrowth of Y Combinator and Techstars. When we decided to do a business accelerator here in Kansas City, we interviewed probably 8 to 10 accelerator programs around the country, learned their best practices and took lessons learned from them, and really brought all that back and applied it here in Kansas City. We're an application-based accelerator, so we open up applications about 2 months prior to the program. We've averaged around 40 applications for each program. We then whittle that down to 20. We interview all 20, and we select the 10 to go through our program. The program is heavy on mentorship and contacts. Every one of we have over 100 mentors in Kansas City right now, all of them willing to open up their Rolodexes, their contacts, and everything else to try and help these companies. The biggest value that our companies get out of going through SparkLab absolutely is the mentoring.
Great, thank you so much. Matt?
Sure. So we're cut from a similar cloth, but we're more of a niche, vertical-based accelerators. We're seeing a lot of these launched in the U.S. over the last year or two, and typically they're structured and built around regional strengths. So St. Louis, as many of you may not know, is a hub for financial services. We have Wells Fargo, Scottrade, Stifel Nicholas, a large number of RIAs and other wealth managers within St. Louis. So it's a healthy and robust community for these early stage financial technology companies. And so a big part of the program is to be able to connect them with the right people, specifically within large organizations. It becomes very difficult for an early stage fintech company to get a warm lead at a regional or a national bank. And so we sort of work around their business model. A lot of these companies are a little further along than concept stage, so we don't work on maybe some of those early stage things that another incubator might. We really are focusing on how do you scale the team, what's focused on business development, marketing, sales, so that we can ramp up the organization and make some money.
Great, thank you so much. So, so at this point, what would you all say are the biggest challenges in those early stage companies in Missouri, and how are you addressing those challenges? Feel free, anyone can answer, and then we can just discuss and see where the similarities are.
I think the biggest issue for any startup is access to knowledge and access to capital. If you can solve those two things, you can propel growth for any startup.
I'd actually follow on to that, Kevin. I 100% agree. The ones where we might slightly disagree is access to capital. I think there's a ton of capital in this region. I think there's a lot of it. But actually what you said about knowledge, I think, is actually educating that capital on the opportunities that exist within our region. I see that being one of the biggest problems that we have is actually having a lot of capital, but that capital is not used to investing in these types of businesses.
I would add to both those comments. I think both of them are spot on. I think especially when you start looking at the differences in size of community around the state, some of this starts to be a little bit more germane than others. I know that we have a lot of capital in our region in Southwest Missouri in terms of individual and business wealth, but what you said, Blake, is entirely true, is that they're not used to investing in deals like this. So for us, it's a little bit of a twofold issue. One is educating the individuals or organizations that would be the investors about the opportunities of investing in this type of opportunity or company. But the other part of that is making sure that the companies have at least a minimum viable product or proof of concept so that they have the opportunity to be successful in front of an investor. And so there's a little bit of a gap in the capital continuum, at least in our region, from getting somebody from idea and business plan to an MVP that they can actually take out to somebody and have a chance of being successful. That's where we're at least.
I think for us in St. Louis, and I certainly echo the comments that have already been said, is really around talent. So you may group that around information. I think it's a different category and a different beast all on its own. For us, specifically around technical talent, so software engineers, developers, and I think that the challenges for especially companies in Missouri, but the Midwest, is that we're viewed as flyover country, and that a young engineer or developer is not going to move to a Kansas City or a St. Louis or Columbia just because it's not a cool place to live and there's not stuff going on. But I think we can certainly make the case that it is, and that there, on the company side, that hiring an engineer or developer in the Midwest is conceivably much more affordable than hiring one on the coast. So there are programs in St. Louis that are trying to address this, including Launch Code. There's a new Coder Girl, a women's hacking group that launched last week. They have their first meeting in 2 days. And so it's really how do we instead of poaching engineers from each other, how do we grow the pool so that there are more potential coders out there that will help grow our startups, our tech startups.
So I think for those who are watching right now, just to give them a better idea of the different cities represented in this panel, could each of you kind of give us a description of what is the economic, or what is the entrepreneurial ecosystem like in your city, and how might these be different? We've got Springfield, Kansas City, and St. Louis here.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. The Springfield region, I think, historically, we would like to believe that we grew on entrepreneurship. And when you look at some success stories like Bass Pro, Jack Henry, O'Reilly, Springfield Remanufacturing, we have the good examples that are now vibrant companies. But what we always lacked was the density of entrepreneurs in the region to have it really be considered an entrepreneurial climate. So we had the success stories, and I think we kind of like to think of it as an entrepreneurial growth story, but we lacked the density. But it's been growing recently. There's been more of a focus from Missouri State, from the Chamber of Commerce, and from the city government itself as institutions to say, what can we do to help individuals, entrepreneurs, and industry to make this a focus. So we opened the eFactory a year ago, and we invited a lot of regional partners to join us here in that effort. So we have the Small Business Technology Development Center, we have the Springfield Core Chapter, we have Missouri Enterprise Manufacturing Extension Partnership, Procurement Technical Assistance Center. We also have the local association chapter for IT professionals, the Mid-America Technology Alliance. So you can see we're really trying to come together and make a concerted effort to make it as easy as possible for people to find resources. 1 Million Cups opened in Springfield. Some of you hopefully are familiar with the program of the Kauffman Foundation. Bring entrepreneurs together every week for presentations and discussion. Launched with over 150 people. We've averaged over 120. One of the larger sustaining programs that we're aware of. So there's a lot of energy right now, and I think that we see that impetus, or that as an impetus to continue to form as many opportunities as we can. The Chamber has been exceptionally helpful. They have existing business services, obviously, that help entrepreneurs a little further along. But we're also working with them on 2 new initiatives that we should launch in the first part of 2014. One would be an entrepreneur mentorship program. It's in a pilot phase right now. But that really seeks to accomplish what some of the other communities and some of the other comments have already been, is that we need a pool of knowledge and a pool of experience that we can rely on and pull from to match with these entrepreneurs. The other part of that goes back to what I discussed with the issue of us having to get an entrepreneur from idea to being able to be funded. So we're looking at creating a seed capital program that would allow us to help bridge that gap enough to have a fighting chance for some follow-on Series A and larger rounds. I think the strengths are the services are in place. We have a fairly educated workforce. We have institutions, higher education, community college system, and a quality high school system. Low cost of living, strong community support for this, but the challenges exist that until recently there hasn't been a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs, entrepreneur action, and until that starts to increase, it's difficult for us as institutions to really bolster that conversation. But it's starting to get there, and then the access to capital component.
Yeah, and how would that compare to St. Louis and Kansas City? Anyone want to chime in?
I think the Kansas City ecosystem is is obviously growing. I think you look at things like Google Fiber that definitely poured gasoline on what I consider was already kindling fire here. When we started Think Big about 5 years ago, it was really kind of like an experiment. Like, hey, are there people in Kansas City that really, or the region, that are looking to be entrepreneurs or tech entrepreneurs, whatever you might want to be? And as things have grown, there's been a lot of starting. And so I think where we're at as an ecosystem is we're starting to see, and failing's okay, but we're starting to see some people fail, which is fine. But now there's an ecosystem for them to fail and fall right back into the ecosystem and continue to grow. And I think that's one of the biggest things is continue to grow the ecosystem. And one of the things that Kevin and I were actually talking about right before we hopped on live was that this concept of clustering and clustering innovation partners and people that are doing things, like-minded people here in the downtown ecosystem, I think will only continue to propel our ecosystem. And you look at guys like Tony Hsieh out in Vegas with the downtown project. This whole idea of putting a bunch of like-minded people together in one area and hoping for a lot of collisions, I think that goes a long way, and I think that's one of those things that if we can continue to do that here in our ecosystem in Kansas City, there's just a lot of things that can happen. The reason that Silicon Valley or New York or Boston or any of these larger considered tier 1 tech hubs, if you will, the reason they're so successful is because you can go walk down the street and talk to one of your customers, randomly see them at the coffee shop, and you say, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. A lot of people know what each other do. Like I know what Matt does out in St. Louis, but I don't know what he's doing on a day-to-day basis, and I can actually help him. And when we can facilitate those types of conversations and those types of collisions on a daily basis by clustering a bunch of really smart people together, I think that's how we're going to really continue to propel not only Kansas City, but really the Midwest region. I think you can build a company anywhere.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on that a little bit. One thing that's a little bit unique about SparkLab KC is we went out and got the community involved. And what I mean by community is we have over 16 corporate and university partners and sponsors. These partners and sponsors host a weekly dinner for our startups during our program, and we bring in outside speakers and experts in subject areas to help really propel the entrepreneurs through knowledge. And every one of these companies and universities that partners with us actually makes part of their staff available to these companies. So if there's any kind of expertise they need, we have access to it. And frankly, that really is what drives the SparkLab companies. Because what we like to tell them is there isn't anyone in Kansas City area that we can't get to. So if they need the contact, we can actually provide it.
Great. I think from the St. Louis perspective, I think it's the realization that we are competing for talent and capital and deal flow with larger cities like New York and Boston and Silicon Valley, and that where are the unfair advantages? And I think that's why 630 is existing today, is that we have an unfair advantage in financial services, we have an unfair advantage in life and biosciences. So we're seeing, to Blake's point, clustering and infrastructure and capital around particular regional strengths. So life and biosciences, financial services, there's talk of an ag tech accelerator, other niche accelerators around lean manufacturing, consumer products. What are some ways that we can compete in the national and international economy in ways that St. Louis has some built-in handicaps or ways that we can be better in than other cities? And so that's what we're trying to see is more of a vertical approach. You're seeing that in cities like Cincinnati. They have an accelerator around consumer products called the Brandery. They're able to connect their startups with a bunch of, I'm trying to think of the Procter & Gamble, right? Like they're a huge consumer product company in Cincinnati, and they make a great institutional partner, potential investor with those early stage companies. So, for us, we've seen a lot of traction in the last couple of years around building that infrastructure, working with building the community here, having institutions like T-Rex and Arch Grants, Launch Code that sort of provide a hotbed. And then it's how do we connect these companies with A round and B round capital, and at the same time getting them the talent they need to grow because sometimes that may not come from St. Louis. We'll have to recruit outside the region.
And so some of you sort of touched on this, but are there any cities that you are doing something right that you really admire that you think would work in your own city?
Yeah, I can think of one. So there's this really cool organization fund out of, I believe it's Grand Rapids, Michigan, called Start Garden. So I would really like to see. So what Start Garden does is they're sort of investment fund. They do grants, but they're, instead of doing like 50,000 or 100,000 like some of the accelerators in St. Louis, they're all about planting seeds. And so they're typically like $5,000 mini grants or mini investments in companies. And it's the idea that, you know what, ideas in my mind are worthless, right, until you can execute and be able to get to that MVP stage so that they're viable. So how do we get more people building products and MVPs? Well, let's give them $50,000 to go out and wireframe it and build something. So I think selfishly for better deal flow and for better companies and for people that aren't farming out business plans, they're farming out products, a model like Start Garden makes a lot of sense for communities to sort of pre-populate their pipeline with some viable leads and some viable sort of seedlings. So I'd really like to see that in St. Louis, and hopefully we've got the money here, we've got the infrastructure. It's a matter about, let's put some great people behind it and watch it grow.
Anyone else?
I touched on Vegas a little bit ago, but I think overall you start to look at all these other types of cities, and we'll go ahead and call them quote-unquote second-tier cities when it comes to the tech world, if you will. But cities like Vegas, or even in Santa Monica, is cities where a lot of companies are starting to cluster around each other and basically have an innovation district. I think those are the cities that are going to continue to come out successful. Not to mention, obviously a little bit biased sitting here in Kansas City, but to have a mayor like Mayor Slade James, who is, really, from my point of view, being the entrepreneur in the room, act like an entrepreneur mayor and going after things and being creative and, seeing that there's an opportunity, or if there's an opportunity, and going after that with his entrepreneurial community. I think the kind of confluence of the public-private sector are some really interesting opportunities that could be had with clustered innovation centers in their cities.
I agree with that.
Jump in a little bit. The thing I think works the best is the transparency amongst all the accelerator programs in the state of Missouri. I know Matt has got a SparkLab KC graduate in his 630 program. I've worked with Brian Matthews at Cultivation Capital. I talk to Herb C. all the time at Think Big. I think what's really interesting about the state of Missouri is everyone's trying to help each other. There is no territorial issues going on. If someone from St. Louis needs help, we're there. If one of our companies needs help, St. Louis is there all the time. And I think that really speaks well to the entrepreneurial climate in the state of Missouri.
Kevin, I totally agree with you. I think those types of things, just that question of how it can help, and doing those types of things, you're spot on with that.
I would echo all those sentiments and just add that the public-private partnership comment I think is spot on. If you look at some of the areas that we really admire, there's a lot of back and forth and support between public and private entities. And so the one thing that we're really focused on right now is increasing private industry support. We have a lot of good things happening right now that have been spearheaded by the university, the city, and a couple of private industry folks. But really for us to take that next step, we need to have some of the commitment that we see in some other communities. St. Louis and Kansas City are great examples. Chattanooga is a decent example. Nashville. So as we continue to move forward, we need to find a way to both increase the opportunities we have for entrepreneurs, but also be mindful that we're creating an entrepreneurial culture that also needs to be supported by other amenities that will help keep people here. So if that's an arts culture or an entertainment culture, we have to be cognizant that we're building an area as well as a support service. So that's one of the reasons that the Idea Commons I mentioned at the very beginning, trying to blend some of this innovation with design and entrepreneurship in the arts, really comes into play for us, both from an effort to keep and retain young talent, keep and retain businesses that have an opportunity to relocate, but it's also an opportunity for us to have some multidisciplinary interaction to also spur new types of businesses, new types of creativity. So I think as we move forward, the importance for us is still going to be on that public-private partnership and understanding that we're trying to create a larger environment on which this is to occur.
So this year we've seen some legislation that was designed to help early stage tech companies, and between these tax credits for angel investments and the increases for budget in the Missouri Technology Corporation, the big picture, how do you think the state of Missouri is doing to support these young companies through their legislation and policies?
I mean,
I'm
for
jealous
us,
of the arch grants.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm hopping right in on that. I'm extremely jealous of the arch grants on what St. Louis has going on in that side of the state. I think that's a huge kind of leg up in terms of attracting new businesses to your city, which again, it grows your ecosystem and grows all those things. But I think things like the arch grants, these special vehicles, if you will, that again, back to the public-private partnership, these special vehicles that the city can bring to, or the state can bring to help grow these companies, I think are really great.
And I think to that point, I echo that completely. That's been a tremendous asset for that community. And some of the conversations that are starting to happen in the legislative session are positive in the sense that we're starting to see more willingness to talk about these vehicles. House Bill 1495 had something that looked very similar to arch grants in terms of matching funding for communities around the state, St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia, Springfield, and then undesignated rural areas. But one of the challenges for us, I think, is education. One of the values that we see in helping from a legislative perspective support startups and small businesses is the returns on those programs can really be profound, and they're not that expensive when you compare it to some of the other opportunities we have for what I would deem more conventional economic development. So when we start to make that argument of if startups are risky, we might lose the money, but this is the potential, this is what could possibly see from it, and the expenses relatively ratcheted down. That's a tough conversation to have. Somebody's going to have to be willing to put themselves out there a little bit, and if it fails, obviously that's not going to be good for the program or that congressman. But at the same time, we have to be willing to take that chance, because there are other communities in other states that we've seen success with similar programs, whether it be through an arch grants type of program that's run through the state, whether that is angel tax credits that are more aggressive. We've seen that work in Kansas fairly well. It's getting over the hurdle from conversation to action that's really going to be interesting. So as those conversations continue to increase in frequency, I'm optimistic for what the next session might bring, but it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I think it brings an interesting question, right? Like, what's government or political legislators' role in helping startups, if any? And I would argue that there are certainly some spaces like arch grants or MTC where we see a demonstrated value for the startup community. But I think for us too, it's around, do you get into sort of the picking winners game, the investing game, or is it a better role to sort of invest in infrastructure and reducing friction for especially out-of-town companies to be able to come into the state and city? So for example, in each of our last classes, we've had an international startup, which is really exciting. So we had one from Scotland, and this time we had one from Melbourne, Australia, fly all the way to St. Louis to participate in our 14-week program. So how can the government or political leaders, focus on how do we make it easier for internationals to come here for business acceleration programs or to participate in what we have? Simple things like flights. They're just adding a direct to San Francisco from St. Louis. We don't have one to London. So if we're going to position ourselves as a financial or tech hub, not being able to get here in a straight shot, that's significant for investors and for companies who can't get into Missouri without a lot of friction. So can we employ and challenge the powers that be in the government to sort of make these things easier in terms of business licenses, taxes? How do we reduce the friction for early stage companies to take root here, and is that a better role for them to play?
And I think that's an important point, is infrastructure, and part of that is education. If we can rely on more consistent and even increased education funding, or workforce development funding, or technical or vocational training funding, that could also ease some of the burdens on us being able to both attract companies and grow them, because we have the resources available in terms of human capital to be able to meet the demands.
I think we have a question from the audience. Michael Brooks said, I think he's in Columbia. Has anyone had success with programs to draw out new investors? He mentioned that some of you were talking about there being capital available.
Yeah, certainly for us on the 630 side, I think what we bring to potential investors is that we're able to conduct due diligence and be able to screen for. We make it a less risky investment in that, in a sense, and I think that's for any accelerator that's writing checks, that you sort of there's a rubber stamp of approval, and that you're vetting them. The investor gets to know them. Maybe they serve. We've seen a lot of them that will serve as mentors. They get to know the company, get to know the program, what we're doing, and then they write a check later. So I think for us, especially within financial services, some of them know the industry well. They know the problems that the industry faces and that it's ripe for disruption. And so it's sort of a sneak peek. They're able to see the companies in the portfolio under a different lens, and then they once they're more comfortable, they write a check. And what's also interesting is that a lot of them understand the inherent risk of investing in an accelerator fund, and that you have to have a lot of big wins, right? Like the Airbnbs or the Dropboxes of the world, in order to really make it make sense financially. While a lot of them will also do it for fun or for philanthropic reasons. They'll invest in an accelerator incubator because they believe it's going to help grow the next, for St. Louis, it's the next Build-A-Bear, it's the next Express Scripts, it's the next large company in X city, Y city. And so for them, instead of writing a check to maybe a nonprofit organization or charity, they're able to see their dollar stretch further and helping businesses grow. And it's just a different type of investment. I'm very much connected to the nonprofit community here, and they're doing great things. And in this way, we're also helping the city in a different way.
Matt, just to pile onto that, I mean, the things that we've seen as well that we've started doing a lot more is we work kind of in a fundless sponsor type of model, where we have a lot of angel investors that we work with on a regular basis that are looking for a deal flow, but they're looking for kind of that due diligence to be done for them. And to echo what you just said in terms of kind of that rubber stamp of approval, is when we're working with them, they kind of feel a little bit safer, not to mention that their investment is quote unquote being looked after. So we've been working with a lot of different types of investors and really trying to educate them through the process of kind of those first early stage investments, as well as moving into a larger seed or angel type rounds where they're able to still invest there, but still kind of have the oversight of it, if you will, and not have to really manage it day to day.
I'll tack on to kind of what Matt said. I think a lot of the value of the accelerator programs for our investors, we have 36 angel investors in SparkLab KC who funded the program. And what it does is it gives them a chance to mentor these companies during the 90 days they're there. And as Matt said, they get to know the teams, they get to know these companies, and they're way more likely to invest in a seed round after they're done with the accelerator program.
Yeah, I think all those things are good points for us. The program is early enough that we're still working on some initiatives and some relationship building to make some of the capital a little bit more accessible in Springfield. We, as a community, have been a very conservative investment group. There's not a lot of risk propensity. See a lot of people who shy away from a pretty typical, really advisable angel investment portfolio theory. You'll have people invest in one or two companies, sit back and say, okay, that's it, we're going to see how they go. When I think we all understand that 9 of those 10 companies in that portfolio will fail, and you hope that the one pays for the 9. So it's an education issue for us a little bit. It is, we're to the point where I think we're going to have to demonstrate value of starting in Springfield. And have a couple of wins before we get a lot of traction with investors in our community. So it's a process, and I don't think there's an easy answer for any of our communities. And I know that certainly we're working hard at it here.
And I think actually, got about 15 minutes left. I'd like to go over to RJI and see if we have students that have questions that they would like to ask. So back to you, Luke. Got questions over there? Oh, sorry, is someone talking? We can't hear you. If they could come up to, I think, the computer screen.
Sure, I won't be bashful here. I'm curious. So we've got a room full of university students here, and I know that in your traditional startup hubs like a Boston or Silicon Valley, that a lot of the success is often attributed to good academic institutions like the Stanford Computer Science Department. Had a big role in the rise of Silicon Valley. What do you see as far as local universities, what they're doing well, what they could be doing better to help spur entrepreneurship in the Midwest and in particular in Missouri?
Well, I can speak from experience here. The University of Missouri actually has a venture capital club, and they've made investments. I think they do $50,000 investments in certain companies, and in fact, they ended up investing in one of SparkLab's companies called Noda. So, I think the process of teaching college students what the entrepreneurial environment's all about, how to look at deals, how to look at investing in startup companies, I think it's going to go volumes as to helping these people come out and be much smarter about the process and what it really means to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think a good example. Go ahead, Blake.
Oh no, go ahead, Matt. Go
so
crazy.
a good example of how that works in St. Louis is we've got a great institution called Washington University. They're able to recruit nationally for some very serious talent, but their entrepreneurial center is sort of centrally located, so it's not part of the business school, which I think is a really big difference. It's really community focused, so they engage other different organizations like 630 or T-Rex, try to get the students out into the community and the ecosystem as much as possible. But the fact that it's also connected to or not associated with the business school, I think, is a big deal, saying that you don't always have to be a business student to learn how to run and start your own business. And then they also, like other universities, they also have a venture capital club, but they also have specific courses around how do you launch a startup, and they have several different competitions. So there's the Olin Cup. They have a more social enterprise Olin version of the Olin Cup called the SEIC Awards. So these they're not only they're talking the talk, but they're walking the walk in terms of being able to write checks and getting these entrepreneurs out into the field, meeting cool companies, and then it's a little easier to convince these young, promising graduates that maybe have relocated here from New York or the Valley to say, hey, there's a real opportunity in the Midwest to launch your own business. You not only have the connections, you have the tools and the capital to start, and I think that's a great model and a great pipeline for what we're doing here.
Yeah, and so obviously I know this is the business alert, but on the other side of the state line, Kansas, I've been a little bit more involved, but specifically with the Entrepreneurship Club and working with the business school on some other different types of initiatives. And I just think seeing a lot of things coming from the actual school itself. The things that I've seen that really spurred a lot of the student excitement is things like the Entrepreneurship Club and some of the other clubs that they're student-led organizations. And we've been really inserting ourselves with those types of organizations because we view it from the student side. If you can help them get immersed into the startup ecosystem, see what it's like to actually be a part of startups, that learning curve can kind of go away a little bit, if you will, when they're immersing themselves within the program. And what I've seen from a lot of the students who we actually have about 5 here right now, they're jumping right in and they're immersing themselves. They're learning a lot more than what they're actually learning in the classroom.
There are a couple of ways I think that are important that we, because we're a university-run program and obviously cognizant of the educational mission of the university, certainly not to undermine the economic development piece of it, but we have to do both. We have existing relationships with classes in college and university to where we interact directly with the students and bring clients to them and have the clients help them solve a problem. And the evolution of that is also, now that the incubator is open, we've placed a number of student interns in companies who are in the incubator, so they have an immersive business experience. That company could do well and end up hiring that individual. They could fail, but either way, it's an experience for them that is unparalleled and something you can't learn in regular curriculum. So I think anytime you can facilitate that type of immersive process for a student, it's going to be positive, and the best way to do that is create relationships directly with the university or program directors. The other part, and I know it's not an institution of higher education, but I think that part of this education process goes beyond that. So we've actually partnered with the public school system to create a 2-year junior and senior level high school program that teaches about entrepreneurship and then actually brings them through a project. So juniors will have a curriculum and they'll have online courses. This is through 5 area public high schools. And they'll compete at the end of that year for the best project. They'll do a competition, and the winners will actually be in a fully immersive program that's in the incubator. They're hiring faculty, we'll house them here, we'll pair them with businesses, and over the course of that year, they'll work with mentors and faculty and business owners to actually develop a product from this kind of idea, early stage business plan, up through hopefully proof of concept at that point. So I think that there are a lot of different ways we can engage students, start to build a pipeline of young entrepreneurs, young talented individuals who have the opportunity then to enter into the next level, whether it be the accelerator, the incubator, or business for themselves.
That's very cool. I think we have another question from the Palmer room. Luke?
Yes.
All right, my name's Lauren, and I'm actually a part of the student angel investment group here at the University of Missouri. And one thing that we are having an issue with is deal flow. So we have a bunch of money, we want to invest in startup companies, but we just can't seem to connect with the entrepreneurs and opportunities that do exist here in Columbia and Boone County. So what is some advice for creating, an ecosystem to bridge the gap between investors, entrepreneurs, or even within those groups?
I can start. I think one of the biggest things when it comes to deal flow is you really just have to spend the time with people. It's about relationships, what people are actually doing on a day-to-day basis and what they're building. I don't know enough about your program to speak on it, but are you guys investing outside of your Columbia region? What are you doing on it? I would need to know more to really kind of give a thoughtful answer. But outside of that, I mean, one of my biggest things when it comes to investing is obviously the people have to be right, the product has to be right, their processes have to be right. But at the end of the day, it comes down to your relationship with them. Do you trust them? How you get through the hard things that will come about when you're building a company?
I think one of the greatest things is during our last program, the University of Missouri's Venture Capital Club came to our accelerator program and got to hear, I think, 7 of our 10 companies' pitches. So they got a first-hand experience of meeting the team, getting the pitch, and asking all the questions. So, I would encourage you to go over to St. Louis, go down to Springfield, and come back to Kansas City when these programs are in session and meet these companies. That's the greatest way in the world to find deal flow.
That's great. I think we have time for one more question. Luke?
Yeah, we have one more question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for coming. And I have a question about, or thanks for talking. I have a question about once you kind of have a proof of concept, how do you talk to some of these developers or investors in some of the developer-rich areas about the next step past the proof of concept?
Well, I think that next step past proof of concept, it really kind of depends on what exactly you mean by that. But I mean, I think once you hit proof of concept, you're building a company. And so there's a lot of different things that you need to look at in terms of building that. And I think having the resources around you, being a part of someone like Think Big or SparkLab or eFactory or 630, finding those resource centers or your innovation centers that you can kind of latch onto and help grow your company and build a team around your company, I think would, from my vantage point, be one of the next great steps, because you really need to build a company around that product.
I think that's exactly right. The other thing that I would add, and this also should be taking place during proof of concept, is you really have to understand, especially if you're going to go seek an investor, is what problem are you addressing, how are you addressing it, and what's the potential. The developer side of it, not as much, but you have to understand where you're trying to get this thing and really have the ability to convey that concisely and cogently. Proof of concept is great if you can also prove market viability. Proof of concept that an app you think would sell works is different than an app you think is great will sell. So I'm not sure what you mean by proof of concept, but if proof of concept and proof of market are the same thing, then at that point, Blake's exactly right. You start building a company.
The other thing I might add to that is when you're doing proof of concept or you're starting any new company, engage the end customer in your process. Validate that what you're trying to build is really something somebody wants to buy before you go through the whole process of building a company and building something out. Get the customer involved and make sure you're building something that somebody will buy.
Kevin, to add on to that, it's like, are you solving a real problem? If you're solving a problem, somebody might pay for that, right?
Well, okay, thank you guys very much. I think before we wrap things up, I just want to get an idea from each of you, what's on the horizon for your organizations, what's coming up for you in the near future. We want to start with Blake.
Yeah. So, we are always continuing to have hyper-focus on changing the way people build companies. One of the biggest things that we're most excited about is that we just announced a few weeks ago that we'll be moving about a block and a half over in downtown, which about triples our co-working space size. And so our co-working space is not only just for co-working, but we also have private offices that are made for growing companies. So if you just raised a little bit of money, you're about to grow from 4 people to 10, we have the ability to open up wall space or put you in a different office space within the same building, and you don't lose the clustering and being around. So we'll be moving to 1712 Main Labor Day, which we're really excited about. That's probably one of the next big things.
Great, thank you. And Brian?
We've learned a lot in the first 13 months we've been open, and in that regard, I think that no matter how old you keep learning, but especially when you're so young, it comes pretty rapidly. So we're looking at adjusting the way we do a couple of things, and more importantly, we're looking at adding the couple of programs I mentioned earlier, a more structured mentorship program that draws a lot more community members into it, and then that seed capital initiative that we're working on right now. Hopefully both of those things will be starting beginning in 2014. The way that I think about what we're trying to accomplish is twofold. One is we obviously want to bring companies in and help them be successful, provide the resources for them to do so. But then the other part of that is talking about trying to build an entrepreneurial community. We're really trying to become an open-armed community within ourselves. So trying to have all the events we possibly can here, trying to bring people out that we don't know, and trying to be a hub of that activity, whether there are incubator clients or not. That adds value to people who are residents here and clients here, but it also adds value to the overall community and conversation. So we're going to continue to try to find programs and opportunities to engage people outside of our business incubator, but certainly try to continue to learn and provide better opportunities for people who are here.
Thanks. And Kevin?
I'm most excited about 630's graduating class. We have a SparkLab company over there called FormZapper who I still talk with him every week, and he is absolutely thrilled with the group at 630. And Matt, all I can tell you is Andy's one of the greatest guys in the world, and if he didn't think you guys were the greatest, he certainly wouldn't say it. So my hat's off to you guys over there in St. Louis.
That's good to know. Thanks, Kevin.
And how about you, Matt?
For us, I think there's certainly a lot of activity and new opportunities, new spaces being launched, new funds, new programs, and I think for us, it's just how do we maintain laser focus and really focus on adding value for the 4 companies who are in the class. So for me, it's continuing to grow and maintain relationships. We have over 30 financial services organizations in St. Louis that I have contacts with or seek to have contacts with, and then it's also beyond St. Louis. How do we get in front of fintech hackathons, fintech meetup groups, fintech VCs who are interested in learning more about our portfolio, and so that's sort of on the other side of the coin, making sure that the companies, when they're ready to, when they're graduating the class, that they sort of have good footing, and we have relationships in place so that if they need to raise more money, if they need to get in front of another potential customer, that we have those introductions and those leads warm and ready for them to jump in. So we're excited to get this class started, and then we'll start a new batch in the fall.
Great. Sounds like there's a lot of exciting things happening. So thank you all for sharing and for joining us in the Hangout. I guess I never gave you the option to ask each other questions, but we have a few more minutes if you had any burning questions that you wanted to ask other members of the panel. But otherwise, I just want to thank everyone in the Palmer Room as well for joining us, and say thank you again to Kevin Fryer of SparkLab KC, Brian Kinkade of eFactory, Matt, is it Eddy? How do you say your last name?
Manetti.
Manetti, I'm sorry, of 630, and Blake Miller of Think Big Accelerator. So thank you to everybody, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.